Gris lay barely breathing, his head cradled in Agatha's lap, her corset, white shirt, and pants stained mostly with my blood. I don't remember going down to my knees, but at some point I must have, either to be at their level or properly to assess the shrapnel in my abdomen. The first few didn't upset me too much, but somehow a larger piece must have hit deep. I stared at my wet palm absorbed into the darkness of the oubliette until Agatha shook me out of my gory reverie. "Hup," she said. I was used to her talking to me like a dog at this point. A curious detail before I forget. Last night I went out late because it was raining. There hadn't been a drop in nearly 2 years, so I was anxious to make it out. When I came back, the boy was standing before me like a nervous housewife in his boxers and Strokes t-shirt that I gave him.
"Where is it?"
He said, his brow fixed at me like some kind of hammy actor. His eyes looked dead. It took me only a moment to realize he was sleepwalking in his own little virtual world. I'm not sure if I actually made any sound, but my raised eyebrow must have communicated to him. "What the hell are you talking about?"
"You know,"
he continued. There I saw him grip the air, an awkward mime like a child trying to grab at something. It looked like he was palming an invisible ice pick. He was about to speak when finally he seemed to snap out of his train of thought.
"Sorry, I know where my room is. Don't help me,"
he said as he lounged the hallway in a pitiful gait like a newborn calf. The knitting needle penetrated the first guard's neck so cleanly I thought she had missed. The guard swatted at the air, soundless like a bee had stung him, before tipping over like a wooden toy. Our approach had been soundless on the grass. Agatha on my knee, one foot in my hand, then vaulting over the wall, looking like one of Dumas' musketeers. I strained to hear the sound of an alert, but heard none as I lounged my way to the one spot I would try to make my ascent. The first accidental fall backwards was fortuitous as I landed on the man who sounded the first alarm. It would take a good 5 minutes before he was discovered. In the interim, I found some inspiration and leapt my way up and over. Agatha's stable diet had trimmed me down significantly. "Over here," instructed Agatha. She scanned our surroundings like it was casual arithmetic. I may have lost us some time already, but his voice didn't carry far. I apologized. Agatha patted my cheek and smiled. There was no avoiding a fight. It was simply a matter of sowing enough chaos that they might not expect our exit. We were going to get in, that was not a doubt. The first pistol shot caught us a bit off guard. The 2 cavalrymen were casually smoking a pipe. Somehow the one's pistol was already preloaded, and perhaps out of competence or a bit of luck, he sidearmed it and lodged beneath my ribs, enough to take my breath away for a second. You must remember, dear reader, that people were significantly shorter back then, so to them I was practically a giant. After seeing my tall form impacted, the 2 soldiers practically offered themselves to Agatha's incisions. Though like a starter pistol, the race was on. The dimly lit and brutalist contours of the donjon was a boon to our vampiric talents for nocturnalism, both in sight and spirit. Though my size and certain tight hallways made for some unfortunate hits on my body, the technology of the weaponry of the time meant that adversaries were quickly dispatched in the reload. Agatha used her voice and played the Lost Demoiselle, attracting and disarming the soldiers as they rounded the corners. It worked so well it had us in stitches, until it cost us too much time, and we could hear the cavernous hallways rumble with the gathered forces, intent on expelling us like a virus from its body. After a few wrong turns, we found ourselves in the inner sanctum. I dangled a guard by his feet until a rather easily found master key fell from his trousers. As we expected, we were met with a vortex of smoke and cacophony as muskets fired at the entrance. But as rehearsed, Agatha flew off my semi-prostrate form, grazing the ceiling undetected, landing behind the last line of defense as I took the lead in dedicated service. I may have taken my time defending their lives, perhaps fending off my mounting injuries, which were as intense as I ever felt. A reminder of my mortality that does wonders for the libido. We ignored the pitiful groans and moans of several dozen bolted doors before arriving, quite intuitively at one that even in the dim firelight was unmistakably painted with a red LV1, some kind of a signal for the guards indicating a special prisoner of the king, I suppose, though handy for us. "Kit Kat," she said, Agatha's voice distinct with her adopted British lilt, cut through the damp, formless air.
"Here."
A playful, almost silly voice responded. Agatha nodded to me, and with what I had left, I demolished the door before it was collapsing on the other side. There's not much suspense here except on whether Gris survived. I will simply say he did just barely. Though Agatha imparted to me in private he was changed from the ordeal. His powers of transformation were greatly weakened, and he had been so starved and reduced by their torture at the time of his capture that he had not dared to try to transform into a cat or something else. After all, his cell was windowless, and there was a good intel that someone in the monarchy knew of his powers. And since he often found himself struggling to reassume his human form once his bestial shape was enacted, there was greater risk in confirming their suspicions. As I bled out, less concerned for my life and more for Agatha and Gris, I suppose's exit, Agatha chewed one of her secret resin balls, and like a mother bird fed it between Gris' tired lips, his little distinctive mustache, I suppose they let him shave, twitching as he swallowed. We sat there for what seemed like an eternity, the distinct sound of the entirety of the French army closing in on our location. Gris opened his eyes as if from a dream and spoke.
"Ah, te voilà, enfant tata. And who do we have here? He looks like a man I served with in the Guerre des Deux Roses, perhaps?"
We both heard Agatha telepathically. "He's not that old, Grizo. He's just a babe compared to us, though quite the force." She smiled at me, noting my clutched stomach, my shirt in full red bloom.
"Ah, bon. Well, I can hear we have little time. Did you have some plan? Dynamite, perhaps, no? I will try to make myself more portable, perhaps. My legs are rather weak at the moment, maybe even a bit broken."
Agatha strapped him to her shoulder like a hunter's catch, his little fur body looking like a stylish mink as I lumbered to my feet. Before I could turn, she caught my wrist and tugged me to her level. She bit again into her ball of resin and brought my lips to hers. I find myself in my dreams again and again, making my way out and through and back out into the crisp Parisian air. You'd think it was a nightmare, but no. Every time I have this dream, I'm filled with a feeling that I can only describe as what it must be like to be in love. Agatha is always behind me. Whenever I turn, she darts in front of me and parts the way, guiding, brandishing a torch, though then we worked in the shadows. In my dream, we are somehow not ourselves, but simply human. Two people, a man and a woman, as if out on the town, getting to know the world as one, marveling at tender discovery. We stop in the open air of the dungeon courtyard, and Gris is our Parisian waiter, setting the table and serving us wine. Yes, in my dreams I drink well, periodically disrupting our soiree by breaking this soldier's neck here and running through another one there. The dreams have replaced my actual memory of how we made our way out, nearly intact. To be frank, I was so fixated on the feel of her lips that the whole affair was simply a chore that I had to accomplish before I could truly reflect on what had happened. That was the last time that, if you'd call it that, we kissed, for a very long time at least. Gris' tired cat form bobbled and nearly slinked off her neck as we stopped running and idled down a starlit cobblestone rue. My bleeding somehow had stopped, and although depleted, I felt like we were youngsters who just broken into an adult party. Gris raised his head and looked at me, his whiskers twitching hello, then at her and then back asleep. "He seems to like you fine," she said. I didn't know it was a test. I flirted. "That's all life ever is, I think," she said back. Or else she just looked at me and thought it. Or else it was from one of my dreams. Gris concealed her neck as we walked back home, her before me. Else I would have. But perhaps for some other time.